Yo! What's good, son? What's good, y'all boys? Now, look, right? Look. Got dang on. Today, we reacting to the Easter egg. I'm gonna show y'all. So, we reacting to the Easter egg of Power Book 4, Force. Season 3, episode 3 breakdown, Easter egg, clues, and all that good stuff. But look though, so I missed the first two. I was supposed to did this breakdown 2 episodes ago, right? So what happened was, I was still getting some content for my my in-person involved, and I was getting content because Call of Duty just came out, so I was trying to get some content for Call of Duty. So now I got all that put together. You know what I'm saying? Today just so happened it fell on today. So got it on, yeah, pretty much. So from episode 3 on up, we're gonna be covering this, and I'm so happy I get to finally cover this because I never thought about doing this, but I was like, why not, you know what I'm saying, do it, because I watch these gens anyway and all the time anyway, so I was like, why not, you know what I'm saying, do it, right? Also, I'm a big fan of Force, bro. I fuck with Tommy heavy, bro. I feel like he's a dog. I feel like can't nothing stop Tommy, man. I be feeling like that sometimes too, but like, I'm talking about just what me just handling the shit, you feel me? But yeah, I'm a big fan of Force, man. I'm a big fan of all the Power, whatever 50 Cent got going on, Raising Kanan, what else? Forrest, everything 50 Cent got going on, yeah, pretty much. I'm cool with it. Like, he's a good director or whatever, producer, whatever. But yeah, man. So I ain't even gonna tie your heads off. Oh yeah, and also, I'm gonna try to drop this every like Sunday or Monday, or drop the video every Sunday or Monday. I will record it probably like Saturday, so it'll be dropped like every Sunday or Monday. Just to let y'all know, yeah, heads up. But I ain't gonna tie your heads off. Let's straight into the vid.
Welcome back to CBI.
You mean welcome back to CBI?
That was crazy.
Now, last week we spoke about the theme of lies, loyalty and leverage, how control was starting to become a bit of an illusion on Power Book 4 Force. This week we're talking about preparation versus vulnerability, not just in the streets, but also when it comes to Stacey Marks' political ambition. Everyone also seems to be playing their own games behind the scenes, lying, scheming and positioning themselves. Family's also becoming a target, and I do think the Marquez cartel could retaliate in a way which may just bring Tommy Egan to his knees. And then there are also those players who are making some power plays in the background. For example, Miguel Garcia and Roberto Ortega's new alliance. So some of these characters do think they're 1 or 2 steps ahead, but in Chicago and where we are at this moment in time, especially in episode 3, every alliance does come with a knife behind the back. With that being said, that's the theme. So let's get straight into the breakdown for Power Book 4 Force, Season 3, Episode 3. Now, towards the end of episode 2, Chavo and the DSDs were worried about getting into a war with the Mexican cartel. That's not what him and his crew signed up for, and they weren't afraid to let Tommy know either. It took Jannar to also step in and calm the situation down, but as we all know, the Marquez cartel would retaliate for what Tommy did to Mateo, and it was the DSDs who actually suffered. You can argue they should have been more prepared. They shouldn't have been sitting out in the open knowing there was a chance of retaliation from a Mexican cartel. Because in this game, you take your eye off for 1 second, it genuinely can be game over. You always have to be prepared.
See, that's why I don't think I would ever like even condone into no type of game, like not be homeboys, friends, nobody that's in no type of game, bro. Cause like the moment you go chill with them, we go play basketball on them, like the moment the nigga just slide on them, it's like it's over for all y'all. Cause nigga, you was there. Yeah, it's like it's over for all y'all. Cause nigga, you was there. You was with him. Even though it's been your bro since fucking kindergarten. Now he in the game, you know what I'm saying? He gets slid on. The fuck? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, bro, I don't want to condone none of that stuff. That your like and end like this if you in the game, bro. And that's kind of crazy. You be thinking it hard till the end of the time, boy. I tell you.
So this episode actually kicks off with Diamond finding Chavo's body under a white tarp in front of his barbershop. which by the way was only half of Chavo's body along with his dog.
Yeah,
it was a
that's
clear
good.
message from the Marquez cartel. They knew it was payback for Mateo, and they also knew the DSDs would also want to retaliate as well. Another problem that they had is that the DSDs were their biggest earners on the northwest side, so now they also had to figure out a way to make up for that drop in revenue. Now this is where Diamond also received a message from King Kilo. He still wanted D-Mac dead, otherwise him and his crew would walk away from their coalition, and that's the last thing that they needed in their position. So let's remember, back in episode 1, King Kilo did give Jannard just 1 week, more on that a bit later on. But because of the Marquez cartel, because the streets were heated to say the least, Tommy wanted to be extra careful, especially around Maria. Tommy's always been a character who's been very well prepared for war. As Mecha once said back in Power Book 2 Ghost, if you have to stop and prepare, then you've already lost. It also reminded me of the time when Tommy went to go see Ruiz back in Season 1 of Power. He had a gun on his waist, one in his ankle, and he also forgot about the knife in the other.
Oops, I must have forgot about that one.
Who the fuck is you, Rambo?
Can I go see your boss now?
So you can never be too prepared, but he just wanted to take the proper precautions, because you just never know when and where the Marquez cartel may hit, just like they came for them in episode 2. With Maria, she is someone who's not exactly about this life as such, but she knows who she's dealing with, and she's also been in and around this life because of who her family are, the Garcias. And I do actually wonder if she'll ever need to use this gun. We saw her pointing it a bit later on in the episode, so let's see if she is actually forced into pulling the trigger. Now a bit later on, she came to see Miguel even though Tommy gave her strict instructions. It's just work and back until things become a bit more calmer in the streets. But Little Village is probably the only other place that Maria would actually be safe. That's because despite who Miguel Garcia is, he would never let anything happen to his baby sister. For everything that he is and what he's done, family does mean a lot to him. He overreacted in episode 1 and also in season 2 episode 10 when he actually kidnapped Maria, which Maria did actually set him straight on. But he didn't want to lose his baby sister because that's all the family that he has left. They have also been teasing that blood is thicker than water, but with this particular relationship, I'm not too sure. I do actually think this one is on thin ice, very thin ice, and I'm going to come to that in just a moment. Now we were also introduced.
Yeah, no cap, because I don't know, man. That kidnapping was crazy. It's like they was just, and the crazy thing is, she was gonna take Tommy out the game. That's the crazy part. If you really thought about it, bro, she was gonna really take Tommy out the game, bro. They was gonna literally fly to Dubai and get like, bro, be out of here and not come back. If he would have thought about it being smart, see, he was thinking about it as a brother and not no business thing. He ain't let her go out there and be a grown woman. You know what I mean? He already realized it's a hitter that's with her. You know what I'm saying? He ain't gonna let, it's a hitter that's with her, and you already know he ain't gonna let nothing happen to her. And you knew he was crazy over her, right? So my whole thing is, why didn't you just let it happen? You would have took over the streets, bro. You would have been, bro. He would have been straight, bro. Been straight.
To Cynthia, Miguel's love interest, who also bought him a gift, a pet pig named Bertha, which is definitely a first for power. But on Miguel and Maria's relationship, Tommy knows that he's just biding his time before he can make another move. We know Tommy will keep his promise not to hit Miguel Garcia, but we know Miguel won't, and Tommy's definitely right. Miguel said straight away in episode 1 to his right hand man, they are going to make a move on Tommy Egan. He doesn't want Tommy dead, but they need to make sure that the hit doesn't come back to the Insane Princes. Now for Maria, at the end of the day, that is still her brother. She did say she has to try, but she did also say, if he does make one more false move, then he's out. And I do think Maria is someone who can definitely take care of herself. She mentioned that growing up in the Garcia household, she definitely learned a trick or two, and Maria sure does have a trick up her sleeve. Running it back to episode 1 and this conversation between Miguel and Maria, she did threaten to tell Shay that Miguel was the one who killed his son to take over the Insane Princes. That's not information that they would have dropped in there for no reason. You then add it to the moves that Miguel's making behind Maria's back, and also potentially flipping over to working for the Marquez cartel instead of Shay, things could definitely start to become a little ugly for Miguel a bit later on, if Maria finds out what he's up to. So she does definitely have an ace up her sleeve, which I do think will probably come back at some point later on in season 3. Definitely need to keep that in mind. Now with the DSDs, we had Izzy coming to see Tommy and Diamond. They obviously wanted blood for payback for Chavo and the rest of their crew. They wanted revenge on the Marquez cartel, and they wanted to go straight for the head of the snake, Roberto Ortega, which is actually very difficult at this moment in time because he is still in solitary. The only thing they could do at this moment was pay their respects, give a bag of cash, and tell him what he wanted to hear. At the same time, Tommy definitely was still thinking about taking out Roberto Ortega. But first up, they had to deal with the problem with the DSDs. They're down soldiers, and that means they ain't going to be able to move as much product. So they wanted to target the United Kings over at Brighton Park to make up for the shortfall. However, Pablo came over and said they had a roundtable meeting last night, and they all agreed that they weren't willing to play ball either. They didn't want to be in the middle of a cartel war because that's something that would affect their families back in Mexico. The decision was made and it was final. Done. There was nothing Tommy and Diamond could do or say to change his mind. One hit to their coalition and that entire part of the northwest Chicago was caving in. They also mentioned that Miguel Garcia now has the north and southwest back under his control, without lifting a finger. To make things worse, Big Smurf heard rumbles that the DSDs were also thinking about leaving as well. And that's when he realized they had to make a move. And the next move was the Serbs. He rolled into the lion's den, and compared to what we went through before with Howie's someone who's always well prepared, the only thing he actually came in with was a bag of product, a peace offering and kind of a peace deal. They had something in common because Roberto Ortega was the reason why Markovic was dead, and he was also messing with Tommy's organization and business. Now this is where I do have a bit of a problem with plot armor because we know Tommy's been messing with the Serbs for a very long time. He also killed a lot of them dating back to Power and also season 1 of Force. He's also the reason why Markovic was in jail in the first place, even though there was betrayal from the Serbian side as well, but that all seems to have been forgiven. But as we're going to learn a bit later on, another theme that we're going to be touching on is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But we also know his power, and Tommy's plot armor will definitely come to an end at some point, maybe in Power Legacy or maybe in that Power movie. But moving on, Budimir, who was a Serb, mentioned that he knows how he could hurt Ortega. His uncle was right here in Chicago. So this is where we saw Tommy make his move. They made a move on Luis Ortega, who was Roberto's uncle, and we saw a nice little throwback to OG Power again. In episode 2 they did have another, which was chopping off the head of Mateo and bringing it to the coalition, just like Tommy and Ghost sent the body parts to the Primeras back in season 1. But this was another. It's something that he did when he threw Chuleta off the roof back in Power. He pulled his ski mask off because he wanted them to know exactly who did this. That's one of many things that have always remained consistent with his character. He wanted to deliver another clear message, and he wanted Roberto Ortega to know exactly who was behind his uncle's death. But now that Tommy's gone after a member of Roberto Ortega's family, I really do worry for when the Marquez cartel hit back, because they definitely will. If Tommy's gone after Roberto Ortega's uncle, it does seem like family's fair game, and we know we're in for a funeral at some point later on this season. So could JP be a death that's actually at the hands of Roberto Ortega and the Mexican cartel, especially because he might just actually be released because of Detective Seng? The way this war is going between Tommy and Roberto Ortega, I just can't help but think Roberto Ortega will eventually make a move when he's released from prison that brings Tommy Egan to his knees, and we know something definitely will. Gary Lennon has teased something will be bringing Tommy to his knees, and I do think it could be just that. The Marquez cartel could potentially be taking out JP. Something else to also consider is Miguel Garcia. Maybe even he has a role. So, on Miguel, we know he brought in the best hitter on this side of Chicago, which I really did actually question in episode 2. I referenced the 4 horsemen that we saw in season 1. I said, ooh, the 4 horsemen, because they turned out to be a complete and utter joke. And so did Mohit. Not many people have been able to get to Tommy in Power, but I do think Gary Lennon is working up to it. But on Mohit, he was actually working for Ortega and paid off by them to not kill Tommy. And watching on was Miguel and his right hand man. They then grabbed him, tortured him, fed his finger to his pet pig Bertha, and found out that it was Roberto Ortega that was in between. That was the cue for Miguel Garcia to give Ortega a call. He couldn't understand why Ortega wanted to keep Tommy alive, especially after Tommy killed his uncle. The thing is,
Almost.
Roberto Ortega wanted Tommy to be his kill, which actually works quite well for Miguel Garcia. If he wanted to get rid of Tommy and keep his hands clean, and make it look like he had nothing to do with it and keep his relationship with Maria, the Marquez cartel are the perfect guys to take him out. We've all heard the phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I just raised it a second ago, and that's the exact situation we have here. Miguel said that he'll happily deliver Tommy to Ortega, and also give him a foothold in Chicago. At the end of the day, he's a businessman, and if there's a better offer on the table, then he will be happy to walk away from Shay, who the Garcias have been in business with for a very long time. There's a long-standing relationship here between the Garcias and Shay. We learned that back in season 2, but he is ready to flip and help the Marquez cartel because of his beef with Tommy. So now it's getting really interesting. Miguel Garcia has created an alliance with Roberto Ortega. He's also ready to source his product from the Marquez cartel and also serve up Tommy Egan on a silver platter. But going back to the point of JP, I really do wonder if he ends up being caught in the crossfire between Tommy and Roberto Ortega, and if Miguel Garcia is involved in any shape or form. I do wonder if that's the last straw for Maria to let this secret spill, that Miguel killed Shay's son to take over the Insane Princes. They are starting to give us a bit more pieces to this puzzle, but just a bit of caution here, we know it's power, and we definitely know there's a twist coming soon. So let's just park this one for now, and we will come back to it as a topic this coming week. Now with Vic Flynn, Tommy did warn him that he didn't want to hear any complaints, because the moment he has no use for him, he was done. The only thing he wants to know is information that he can use on Stacey Marks. So just as a reminder, towards the end of episode 2, Vic did have a conversation with Beth. She told him that if he had two people that had their foot on his neck, in this case Tommy on one side and Stacey Marks on the other, who's the easiest to beat, who's the weakest out of the two, and who's the most vulnerable? The answer was pretty simple: Stacey Marks. Her Rico isn't as strong as she thinks after Detective Seng made that mistake, on purpose by the way, something we definitely will come to in just a moment. She doesn't have full control over Vic Flynn as she thinks, she's coming under extreme pressure, and on top of that, her divorce with Bobby DeFranco was just exposed into the media. Back in episode 2, Donna from the DNC did actually ask whether there was anything that she needed to know so they could get ahead of it, before it comes back to haunt them. That was probably the moment to tell her about Bobby, but she didn't. Instead, Detective Seng leaked it to the media that she was going through a divorce, and it all led to an embarrassing moment in front of the cameras, which in turn is set to lose her some of her biggest donors, who are threatening to pull their support. And that's because she also has a very bad history with the CPD. That was made clear back in season 2. Her relationship with Bobby DeFranco actually helped her case, but now that she's going through a divorce, it's a very big problem for Stacey Marks. Now this is where Vic's plan comes in with the use of Ray. He introduced himself as Jason Booker, he slept with Ray and tried to find out anything that he could on Stacey. He came across a couple of West End tickets which he did use later on. He just happened to be there, knowing full well that Ray would be going as well. After another night with Ray, he found out Stacey Marks is in desperate need of backing, and this is how Tommy Egan could begin to get control over Stacey Marks. She needs money and lots of it, so why not make Tommy her biggest donor? Stacey Marks being backed by the person she was supposedly trying to catch. Imagine how that's going to look to someone like Donna from the DNC, and also those guys who have had her back. It's going to look like she's been working with Tommy this entire time, and probably conspired with them to put away Roberto Ortega, Markovich, and Claudia Flynn to actually help Tommy and the CBI. So Stacey Marks really is about to be in for the shock of her life, when she realizes who her biggest contributor is about to be. Now on Vic Flynn, something that I do think will complicate things a bit later on is his relationship with Ray. It does seem like she's more open to seeing Vic, and I wouldn't be surprised if this relationship got to a point where Vic really started to grow some feelings for Ray. Eventually he's going to have to do a lot of explaining why he introduced himself as Jason Booker and not Vic Flynn. He's definitely going to have to come clean at some point, so that's definitely something on the radar for later on in season 3. I do think he's going to catch feelings, and it definitely will make this relationship a bit more complex. Because then the question becomes, how long can he keep this facade up with someone who he's growing feelings for? So definitely something to keep in mind. Now while we're on Stacey Marks, Roberto Ortega's lawyer did file a motion to suppress the drugs and cash, and that's because Detective Seng drafted the warrant with the wrong digit in the address. He said he wrote down exactly what Stacey told him, and she signed it. But I always had a very close eye on Detective Seng dating back to season 2. I never took him someone who would be working for the Ortegas, but I always knew there was something shifty about Seng, because I did mention he was someone who always did challenge Stacey Marks in season 2. It was also said that he did have his connections in DC. I initially thought that he maybe after her job, or maybe he'd try and take advantage of Stacey Marks' position and maybe swoop in when the time was right. It did look as if he was trying to pull a Cooper Saxe kind of move with what he did to Angela back in season 1 of Power, but he actually works for the Ortegas, and that's another huge problem for Stacey Marks. Recently we've been speaking about Joseph Sikora mentioning that he's about to be pulled in a million different directions across season 3, but so is Stacey Marks, and Detective Seng is doing it right under her nose. So as I mentioned last week, the clock is definitely ticking, and the House of Cards are definitely about to tumble. But moving on to Claudia Flynn. Now on Claudia, I'm really glad that Gary Lennon got this right and let her rot in jail for a decent amount of time. We all know she will be released at some point, especially if the warrant doesn't hold up. We know Stacey Marks' case is now becoming weaker, but having Claudia in jail for a good half of the season is how it should be done. In terms of her struggles, she came face to face with Lady Z, who did try and kill her back in season 2. Although that didn't put Claudia off from standing her ground, maybe because she had the backing of the Marquez cartel behind her at that moment, although that was soon pulled after the conversation with Shen. The Ortegas found out she was working with Tommy by giving them the Viagra triangle, and that meant her protection in jail was done. However, the one person that she still does have in a corner that does have access to a lot of money is Elise. She does come from a very wealthy family, and she was able to put some bread into Claudia's account that allowed her to buy some protection, which actually worked out even better for Claudia. She may have lost the Marquez cartel's backing, but she was able to buy those girls standing behind Lady Z, and I have been saying, don't bet against Claudia Flynn. She showed us exactly why she was the White Devil. But moving forward with Claudia, if she's not backed by the Marquez cartel when she is released, she won't have that much pull in the streets. Whether she can use Elise's resources to buy in with someone, that's always an option, but let's see what her next move is. She definitely will be a problem, that's for sure. But let's move over to the hot topic of episode 3. Diamond, Jannard, and also the move they put into motion with D-Mac attacking the 9/7s. Now with Jannard and Diamond, they were preparing for war. Going back to the earlier point, they just simply had to remain ready. Their crews had to be strapped and ready at all times, otherwise they would have just ended up being sitting ducks like Chavo and the DSDs. It's also a reason why Diamond had to say no to Gianna, Leon's mum. Diamond knows that the world that he's playing in, especially after what happened to Leon, it really is unforgiving. Especially where they are at this moment in time, beefing with the Marquez cartel. It's something that Holly also warned Tommy in season 2. You can't have both. It just simply won't end well. And I do think Diamond knows that, and he definitely did the right thing. If he did get back with Gianna, it does increase the risk of her being caught in a crossfire, just like I mentioned how family could now be fair game, with JP now potentially being a target for the Marquez cartel. But in terms of D-Mac, they had to deal with that situation as soon as possible, because they needed King Kilo and the RDs on board. The last thing they wanted at this moment in time was for them to leave the coalition and have a target on their backs from both the Marquez cartel and also the RDs. Now the reason why Jannard was slightly holding back is because of Shanti's plan. Back in episode 1, she mentioned that she wanted to keep D-Mac alive for another 2 or 3 weeks, make it look like Tommy and Diamond were the ones protecting him, and then set King Kilo loose, which in turn would pave the way for them to take over the CBI. That was Shanti's plan. And if Jannard really wanted to get rid of D-Mac and keep the CBI's hand clean from the hit, then all he should have done is given the information to Diamond that D-Mac hit the Chinese gambling spot with Marshall. He stole 20k's worth of product, give them D-Mac's details, and just let the rest unfold. I'm not sure why Jannard didn't go with that idea, but Diamond's idea was send him after the 9/7s. Now based on D-Mac and Marshall's reaction when Jannard told them who they wanted him to hit, their facial reaction just said it all. Marshall told him that it was a suicide mission. He was constantly shaking his head throughout in the background, warning D-Mac just say no.
He didn't even try to listen to his homeboy. That nigga said, bro, that's a setup, bro. No, it sounds like a setup, bro. Don't do it. And the other Jannard just telling nigga, man, shut up, man. You don't know what you talking about. Like, it really, he's like, bro, that is a setup. But it's crazy because they gonna nigga D-Mac already knew what time it was. D-Mac already knew what time it was. He was already on game before he even started talking. To be honest, he already knew about the game, so he already knew he was trying to get played. That's that timing for you.
Nobody messes with the 9/7s because they're said to be crazy, and also because they do have cops in their back pocket. The problem with D-Mac is he's been so hungry to get back into the CBI and impress. He doesn't care what the cost is or who he's targeting. He just wants to be down with the CBI. Now Marshall may not have been down with the plan to hit the 9/7s, but he was always going to back his boy. He was always going to roll for D-Mac, and that's exactly what he did. Marshall got together a crew, and at first I did actually think Marshall may actually potentially have a chance of biting the dust, but Marshall is a character who definitely still has a big role to play. But we've been talking about D-Mac needing consequences, and it all did point towards Nutty. Now one thing I am actually impressed with when it came to D-Mac is he definitely is smarter than he looks. We definitely know he has a brain on him. He showed it back in season 1. That's only when he decides to use it. He knew not to go with Jannard's plan of going after their stash house because that was heavily guarded. Instead, they planned to ambush the 9/7s thanks to some help from Bones' cousin, who gave them the location to one of their transfer locations. Again, the problem with D-Mac is, just like he said in this conversation with Marshall, he's always been about this life. He doesn't know any different.
JP, D-Mac chose this life, but he keep choosing it.
Tommy tried to get through to him, told him to go to school, dropped him off to Great Shores Youth Academy, told him to get a job and use his brain for the good. The problem is, all he knows is this, and all he keeps choosing is again this, and also the black market where he got this grenade from, which did actually come in use. After the ambush on the cops, which by the way resulted in more dead cops, that's going to be a big problem for them going forward. Law enforcement are going to come down on the streets pretty hard, as if D-Mac hadn't caused enough problems for them already, because if you remember he killed Seamus back in season 2 episode 4. Now they have 2 more dead cops on their hands. But the ambush was a semi-success. They robbed the 9/7s, but ended up in a gunfight which resulted in the death of Nutty. But that didn't faze D-Mac one bit. He was running off so much adrenaline around the robbery that they just pulled. He did acknowledge Nutty, but he is going to need to feel some real consequences, which I do think will come pretty soon. The 3 that will really hit him, which we spoke about in my breakdown for episode 2, is JP, Genesis and Marshall. If and when any of those 3 are taken away from him because of his actions, that's when he's going to learn. Now what then followed is about to cause a lot of tension at the top of the CBI. Jannard and Diamond were hoping that DMAC was one of the dead bodies, but when he strolled through, it looked like they just saw a ghost. They couldn't believe that DMAC was still alive, because they sent him into an ambush. Jannard even gave them the heads up, and in that moment, they had no choice but to make it seem like they were happy with his work, and then welcome him back to the CBI. But who strolled in just in that moment? His uncle Tommy Egan. And this is about to cause a lot of mess at the top of the CBI. Tommy's going to have all sorts of questions for Jannard and Diamond. He's probably about to give DMAC the Tariq treatment, and it's about to cause a real terror at the top, at a time where they probably do need to stick together. But definitely now excited to see how this now unfolds for episode 4. With that being...
that part right there, that's gonna be tough right there. Cause it's like he walked in at the perfect moment. He's just like, yeah, you can join CBI now again, right? And Tommy was like, what's CBI? When was he ever in CBI? So nah, that part was tough. I ain't gonna lie, bro. This season been real crazy. I like the season so far, bro. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, bro. It's been real good. I can't wait to see episode 4, bro. And without further ado, like, comment, subscribe on the video. Subscribe if you're new. We're on to the next one. Hold on, let me finish it.
Being said, that's a wrap for the breakdown for episode 3. Drop.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, we on to the next one, y'all.